and welcome to our Facebook Live event. My name is Simone Stanley, Business Relationship Manager with Plant Tracker. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I'm working on today. I'm on Duncan John land on the beautiful central coast of New South Wales. I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Our guest today is Scott Lynch from Community Therapy, and he's joining us to chat all things functional capacity assessments. Scott is an allied health professional and founder of Community Therapy. Thanks for joining us today, Scott. Nice to see you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I join everyone from Warramai country and Port Stephens today, where the weather is quite lovely.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you so much today, Scott. And before I start, I'd like to remind everybody that you can ask any questions in the chat and we will answer them at the end. So, Scott, so great to talk today. And what is the actual core purpose of functional capacity assessment?
Yeah, we thought this would be a nice little topic to talk about today. And I guess it's not a little topic. Functional capacity assessments, or often abbreviated to FCAs, are really considered a core component of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. However, FCAs occur in many other areas of healthcare as well. So it's not as though they're unique to the NDIS. Simply put, a functional capacity assessment is assessment done by an health professional, typically an allied health professional, looking at somebody's capacity or abilities for them to perform different activities of daily living. And then with the NDIS, that helps a lot to be able to determine what sort of support a participant needs. And that could be care support, that could be what level of housing, how to engage with goals around community access and employment and therapy, and quite wide-ranging, and that's quite individual and unique to each person. So the core purpose is really to determine what sort of support each person needs.
Yes, I really like, individuality and catering for personal is really important in this sector. And, coming to that is who can actually perform a functional capacity assessment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. As I alluded to just before, it's typically a health professional and an allied health professional. In the NDIS, it has become definitely a core component of an occupational therapist role. And the reason being is, if we break down occupational therapy and into the first component there, occupation, that comes from really looking at somebody's activities. So an occupational therapist has a really wide scope of practice of looking at somebody's ability to perform and engage with meaningful activities in their life. So it became quite a natural, I guess, evolution in the NDIS for OTs to be the primary health professional delivering FCAs across the country. However, other allied health professionals do provide those assessments quite regularly, not just in metropolitan, but very much across regional, rural, and remote areas. You'll see physiotherapists, for example, completing FCAs as well as what I would say the second most common allied health professional to provide an FCA. There are other allied health professionals and health professionals that provide FCAs, but in general, I would say OTs and physios are the most common.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's so important to achieve those goals. So I really like how you tie that in when you actually perform them. But how many hours should we budget for a functional capacity assessment when we go for it?
I smile because it's very difficult to give a generalization there, but I will do my best to. It can vary quite a lot from if it's somebody's first functional capacity assessment as they've entered the scheme, the NDIS, or if it's a review following a significant change in their life, and maybe they need a lot of things looked at, from home modifications to equipment to different therapy and housing, etc. Or it could just be a review 18 months into somebody's plan, and it's a bit of a light touch from the therapist that's already working alongside them, and that would require far less time. But let's give an average of what somebody's maybe first FCA would look like. And you could expect up to 10 to 15 hours. And that could be made up of at least one face-to-face appointment, but often there's several. So coming to meet somebody, going through what their goals are, background information, talking to family, etc. It could be then another visit a week later, potentially. And then it can be going through lots of background documents, looking at the current NDIS plan, looking at medical information, specialist reports, sometimes conducting outcome measures, getting those scored, interpreting those, and then starting to put a plan together and report writing naturally. So quite variable, but budgeting 10 to 15 hours for a first FCA is probably a good place to start.
Yeah, I know it's so hard, to put a figure on that. I really understand, but it's good to give guidance, I think, so people know what's involved. But we also know that recently, with all these talks about the NDIS review and pace, how do you think that actually impacts functional capacity assessments in the future?
It's a very good question. And I think participants, families, stakeholders across the NDIS at large, whether it's providers of therapy, providers of plan management, coordination, etc., even agency staff themselves, we've all gotten used to change in the sector as much as we can, but there's been a lot of changes since the NDIS has launched, but we certainly are in a big NDIS review process at present, so there are more changes to come. Around functional capacity assessments, what comes to mind for me is the potential role of the navigator and how that may blend in some components of what independent assessments kind of were in the past. So the agency, as well as Bill Shorten, have been very clear that independent assessments aren't coming back as they were trialled previously. However, there has been discussion around more standardizing what that assessment and access to assessment through a navigator role may look like in the future. Drawing on my experience from other funding schemes such as aged care, my assumption here is that there will be some level of a standardized assessment to be able to ascertain what that baseline plan is for somebody. Functional capacity assessment by then an allied health professional working with a participant and family is still going to be really required to be able to refine and individualize that further. There's only so much that you can do as a central, government authority in the time that you have to take that snapshot of somebody's life, get the plan as realistic and appropriate as you can, before then handing that to people to work with ongoing. So I think it's a bit of a long-winded way to say, I would argue that FCAs in the future will continue to be more important if there are some standardized assessments that come in place to make sure that people's plans and their goals are still highly individualized, as well as when you're moving into a different rhythm of reviews and light touches and conversations in the PACE system, you're going to have a good relationship and ongoing sort of FCA and light touch FCA going on with your therapist. So changes it a little bit, but overall FCAs are always going to be, a component of the NDIS, as they are with any other healthcare scheme in Australia. Sometimes they're just worded differently.
Yeah, I really like it's sometimes good to really deep dive into this and understand what the changes are and how they're impacting. So really, thank you. I think it's really important at the moment, particular with so much talk and making sure that we all know what that maybe mean in the future for all of us. But what can families and participants and coordinators actually do to ensure that this is going to be a really smooth and positive experience for everyone?
Yeah, to have a smooth and positive functional capacity assessment experience, you really want to just have open communication. So I guess as therapists, we know that we've got that privilege of coming into somebody's life to help, and we're very respectful of that, and we don't want to just step in and start making changes or recommendations. We really want to work with people. We want to identify people's meaningful goals and help people move towards those. But I think what can be hard from a therapist's point of view is what information do we have? So the more information that we have, the better recommendations and advice and better linkages to services and supports that we can give. We definitely know that it can be hard to trust giving certain information to people. That could be trusting giving details about your plan and trusting giving other details about your medical history and who's involved with your care. So we're respectful of that. But the more information you can give to your health professional, the better. It'll allow you to really co-design that process and goals and what you're expecting out of the functional capacity report, especially if you're taking that report to a plan review meeting or a review of a reviewable decision, etc. It's really important to have clear goals and expectations of what you're expecting from the FCA report, and so that the OT or the physio, the health professional, is able to communicate, is that realistic from what they're seeing as well, so that you don't find yourself several weeks down the line with and maybe an outcome or a report that's different to what you expected. So clear communication always wins.
Yes, and it's so important that we all collaborate, exactly what you say, so that we can really achieve those goals together. And yes, I really like how you highlighted that collaboration piece. It is really essential so that we can all achieve the best outcomes for the participants together. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Scott, for sharing such a crucial part of what is involved in the process. And I really appreciate your knowledge and your experience. And please remember that there will be links and more resources available in the chat. And also, if you'd like to hear further other topics for us to cover, we would appreciate to hear them. And thank you for joining us today. I'm Simone Stanley, and see you next time.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.